Telstra, Woolworths and Woodside among the worst performing stocks over the past year. The federal government promises money to address domestic violence, and we'll tell you about Australia's $200 million home. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Thursday, the 2nd of May, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, we have an interview coming up today with Roger Montgomery, the Chief Investment Officer at Montgomery Investment Management, a fantastic supporter of this podcast.
It's all about private credit, and we talk about exactly what private credit is. Then Roger runs us through the 5 myths of investing in private credit. The bottom line here is private credit as an asset class is becoming much more available to retail investors and wholesale investors. And as a result, and this has all happened since the GFC really, as a result, you can diversify your portfolio. There's opportunities there. So it's a great chat with Roger about private credit and the myths involved in investing in it.
I'm a sucker for a good list, Sean. So as soon as you and Roger started talking about the top 5 myths of private credit,
you're in.
Okay, I'm listening. Yeah, It's well worth a listen, though. It is coming up after the show. The main story, though, this morning, some of Australia's best known and most popular companies in terms of retail shareholders are struggling to provide investor returns, with the share prices of energy giant Woodside, Woolworths, Miner, South32, Telstra, road toll operator Transurban and Qantas as well, all down more than 10% over the past year.
We speak about the strong performance of the S&P ASX 200, which isn't far off record levels, notwithstanding a bit of a fall yesterday. But much of the strength has come from the big banks, gold stocks, tech stocks, and the insurers. There's also a layer of very poor performers, and some of them are household names. Broadly speaking, the lithium and other battery metals companies have been among the worst performers, as have some healthcare stocks, while interest rate sensitive companies like Tabcorp, Nine Entertainment, Endeavour Group and Domino's Pizza Enterprises have had shockers. In fact, that group of companies I just mentioned there, they're all down more than 20% over the past year. Telstra's one that hasn't done well. Now, it's a company with the most shareholders. It's down 8% so far this year, 15% over the past 12 months. Woolies is down 15% this year alone, and 17% over the past 12 months. Woodside is at 12% this year, 17% over the past 12 months. And retail investor favourite Qantas, well, it's down 11% over the past year. Mind you, it is up actually 9% this year, so it was doing worse. But as you mentioned, those other companies as well, South32, Transurban, they're all really big stocks, which just had really poor performances.
Sean, I need to prove to you that I listened to you. So you have said many times, and I have taken it in and I have written it down, that share prices, they trade on future earnings, like almost more than what's happened in the past. It's what's going to happen. So presumably, using that little nugget of knowledge, the poorly performed stocks aren't looking great in terms of future profits.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, for all companies, there's the macroeconomic environment and the micro environment, what's happening in the industry in which it operates in, within the company itself. In terms of the big picture, what's happening in the economy, interest rate sensitive stocks haven't done as well because rates are going to stay higher for longer. Then you have things like in Qantas's case, fuel costs remain high and there's more competition in the market. That's pushing down prices they're getting for seats. The much better performance from Qantas in recent weeks comes after the announcement of a revamp of its frequent flyer program. Telstra's done well in the mobile phone business, but in its case, its Australian enterprise operation, where margins should be good, hasn't been so strong. Woodside suffered from lower energy prices. That's more of a macro reason. That's relative to the previous 12 months, of course. There's also concerns over its climate change strategy. We've been talking about that. All companies are affected by both. Really, the moral of this story, Michael, is while the share market is doing relatively well, the big 4 banks being the example, there's a bunch of companies that aren't. And some of them are very widely held by investors. So it is a 2-speed share market, Michael. That's how I'd like to leave it.
All right. Should I write that down as well then in terms of
Probably not.
my Aylmer education that I'm getting here? How did local markets perform yesterday?
Well, right on cue, just when I'm talking about stocks doing well and poorly, the market fell. It was down 1.2% yesterday to 7,570 points. More than 80% of stocks ended lower, led down by energy and materials stocks. Woodside, Santos, Fortescue Metals, they all fell by more than 2%. BHP was off more than 1%. Worst of the large caps, though, was tech giant WiseTech Global. It fell more than 4%. In corporate news, Michael, Woolies said it's agreed to sell 5% of Endeavour Group, taking its shareholder down to 4.1%. Now, Woolies spun Endeavour off 3 years ago. Boss Brad Banducci yesterday said a material equity investment in Endeavour is no longer needed. Woolies' share price was flat. That's a pretty good effort yesterday, while Endeavour's dropped 4%. Shopping centres owner Vicinity Centres reaffirmed its earnings guidance as it is confident that medium and long-term fundamentals in the retail sector remain favourable. Investors weren't quite so sure. Its share price fell 2.3%.
All right. What about international markets? Much going on?
Plenty more. Oh, how dare you even ask?
I'm sorry. You heard how hesitant I was. As soon as I said, I'm like, I know there's stuff going on. So why are you saying it like that? You're making a goose of yourself here, Michael.
Lots and lots. In the US, hotter than expected labour cost data sent bond yields soaring, adding to concern the Fed will be forced to keep interest rates high for much longer than expected. Now, overnight, the Fed board was meeting, and while no shift in interest rates is expected, Chair Jerome Powell was expected to strike a more hawkish tone. That didn't help the Aussie dollar, which fell back below 65 US cents. In Europe, Germany pushed the 20-country Eurozone to faster than expected economic growth, although market watchers still think interest rates in the region will fall in June. The Eurozone's gross domestic product, so its economic growth rate, was 0.3% in the first 3 months of 2024. That's pretty poor still, but it's not as bad as it's been. It actually went backwards at the end of last year. Oil extended its decline on the prospect that a ceasefire in the Middle East will ease tensions and as signs of higher inflation weigh on the outlook for US demand. The prospect of higher for longer rates is weighing on cryptocurrency markets as well. Bitcoin recorded its worst month in April since November 2022. That was when Sam Bankman-Fried's FTX empire collapsed. Bitcoin tumbled then. It's done very well since January this year, but April was a very tough month. It was off 16%, having, of course, hit a record high of almost $74,000 a unit back in March.
Sean, may I give you a little bit of rare praise?
Please. Go for it.
Little shout out to your newsletter that went out yesterday, the Fear and Greed newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday mid-morning or so. Yesterday's newsletter was an absolute cracker, and we've had some terrific response, some great feedback from listeners, so well done.
Thank you. I thought you were going to share the feedback. I was like, tell me, what do they say? What are they?
No. Oh, I can read them on air, but there was some great notes that we got. Some people kind of took the time to hit reply and kind of send us some feedback, and overwhelmingly it was positive. So look, it's too late to get this week's, but you can sign up for next week's. It's out every Wednesday, comes out mid-morning, and it's full of kind of Sean's opinion on a bunch of different stories. So head along to fearandgreed.com.au and put your email address in, and you'll get next Wednesdays. And just thinking about how much you've taught me in today's episode so far, Sean, I'm wondering whether we can add a little segment into the newsletter where you teach us something, and we can call it Get an Education.
Oh, you've been working on that, haven't you?
That whole praise for you was just, the praise for you was just a build-up. I was just leading into that line, an education. Anyway, don't know whether it works. We'll workshop it a little bit more. Maybe I won't workshop it live on air next time. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, the federal government will invest $925 million over 5 years to permanently establish the Leaving Violence program, and National Cabinet has agreed to a number of priorities around domestic violence.
Yes, National Cabinet met yesterday and agreed to strengthen accountability and consequences for perpetrators of domestic violence, including early intervention with high-risk perpetrators and serial offenders, strengthen prevention work through targeted evidence-based approaches, and maintain a focus on missing and murdered First Nations women and children. The federal government will also introduce legislation to ban the creation and distribution of deep fake pornography and sharing sexually explicit materials using technology like artificial intelligence that will be subject to serious criminal penalties. The extra funding from the Leaving Violence program will provide access to up to $5,000 in financial support for people leaving violence, along with referral services, risk assessments and safety planning. All good news, but only a start.
Sean, the Federal Treasurer has announced new rules favouring overseas investors with a proven track record in an effort to attract foreign investment.
It's interesting, this one. There'll also be new safeguards for higher risk proposals, such as Chinese companies wanting to buy critical infrastructure and minerals. Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, made the announcement yesterday. It's a key plank of the government's Future Made in Australia Act. He said it's needed to safeguard economic and national security. Dr. Chalmers said the reforms will make Australia a more attractive place to invest, boost economic prosperity and productivity, and strengthen the country's ability to protect the national interest in an increasingly complex economic and geostrategic environment. The rules include streamlining processes for known entities looking at non-sensitive sectors, so might be a Canadian pension fund wanting to take an interest here. We've seen them before. They can come. It's actually easier for them to do that. It'll mean a reduction in paperwork for those guys. The revamp of foreign investment rules is also aimed at alleviating the housing crisis by allowing offshore money to buy established build-to-rent properties.
And Dr. Chalmers yesterday also rejected forecasts of a large budget surplus in the upcoming federal budget.
Yes, he is managing expectations. He said a report from Deloitte Access Economics, which predicts a budget surplus of $13.4 billion, dramatically overstates the revenue upgrade in the budget. He repeated that inflation will be the primary focus of the budget in just under 2 weeks' time, while it will also, of course, provide cost of living relief.
How about this one, Sean? Qantas is investigating a problem with its flagship mobile app after travellers reported being able to access the frequent flyer details of other people, of strangers.
Yes. A spokesman warned customers to be wary of social media scams as the malfunction in the main Qantas app gives customers access to other people's flight details, boarding passes, personal data. Now, within minutes of the news breaking yesterday morning, social media pages impersonating Qantas had already appeared. Quite phenomenal. Later yesterday, Qantas said a technology upgrade caused the malfunction. It wasn't a data breach. In a statement, Qantas said it's not aware of any passengers travelling with the wrong boarding passes. Let's hope not. And customers would not have been able to transfer or use other people's points.
That is really quite frightening, the speed at which scammers jumped on this information.
Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, did they already have something prepared? I don't know.
Maybe they've just got a generic kind of template to roll out in any case, any kind of information is out there publicly that shouldn't be there. They're ready to go. I find that really quite confronting.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Now, consumers can expect to pay more for their internet services after NBN Co upped its wholesale prices, which it charges retailers.
The Telstras, Optuses, TPGs of the world will pay 4.1% more from July 1. I reckon, Michael, it's a pretty good bet that the increase will eventually filter down to we consumers. NBN Co, which is owned by the Australian government, said it had been impacted by higher input costs of materials from suppliers, and the increase is in line with the annual growth in the inflation rate. Around 100 internet retailers package and sell NBN services.
Weren't we just talking fairly recently about the potential for NBN Co to increase the speed on a whole bunch of different connections without upping the prices? Such a feel-good story that was. That didn't last long.
Well, I mean, I think it's actually regulated. I might have that wrong, but I think it is regulated to move with CPI. And so all these price hikes that we're seeing in insurance and telcos and stuff like that, often it's because it's just tied to inflation. And so if you want a good reason to get inflation down, as Michelle Bullock, the Reserve Bank Governor, keeps telling us, well, here's one. You don't end up with big hikes in insurance and telco prices if you can get it down.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh, we mentioned this one at the top of the show, Sean. This is quite remarkable. Aussie Home Loans founder John Simon has put his prestige home up for sale with a price tag of $200 million plus, which is, if it sells, A record.
Yes, the Point Piper home, Wingadell, is spectacular, to say the least, and a $200 million price tag would easily eclipse the current record. Now, the current record is a $130 million house paid by Scott Farquhar, who recently stepped down as co-CEO of Atlassian. Scott Farquhar and his wife, venture capitalist Kim Jackson. It's a home in Point Piper. Picked that one up for $130 million. It would also trump the $140 million apartment record paid for a penthouse in the near-completed One Sydney Harbour Tower in Barangaroo in Sydney's CBD. John Simons, he said, well, he just wants to spend more time abroad, so he's going to put the house up for sale. It is quite amazing. I have actually been in that house. I went to a Christmas party there once.
I'm sorry, what?
I used to, when I worked at Fairfax, I knew John Simons quite well, and I've written quite a lot about him. I'm a fan of John. He really found himself in dire straits, and he started Aussie Home Loans and changed the economics of home lending in this country. So I'm a bit of a fan of John. Anyway, I went to a Christmas party with there once, and quite the shack, Michael, quite the shack.
Did it have a nice view?
The view was okay. I thought the cinema was excellent, and the yards, and I mean, yeah, just the ultimate entertaining house, I would say.
You probably can't really call it yards, can you? The grounds.
The grounds. You're probably right there. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Grounds.
$200 million. That is just incredible. What a story. One last one before we get to international news. Casino inquiry boss Adam Bell SC has launched a broadside at the slow progress of Star Entertainment in cleaning up its act, contrasting it to reform efforts at rival Crown Resorts, which is something that we've been talking about here for a while now.
Yes, so Mr. Bell told the inquiry he's holding, Bell 2 we'll call it, that he had been assured by Star after his first inquiry in 2022 that reform efforts would take a couple of years. Now he's being told by witnesses it could take up to 5 years, according to a report in The Australian. Mr. Bell is due to report to the New South Wales Independent Casino Commission by July 31 on whether Star is suitable to retain its Sydney licence after earlier findings of breaches of money laundering rules and other misconduct. Mr. Bell questioned why there was a stark contrast between Star and Crown. Now, Crown, of course, regained its Melbourne and casino licences in less than 2 years. Star, it seems, is going to take 5. Mr. Bell's second inquiry, now in its third week, has heard a litany of continuing problems at Star, including fraud, falsification of gambling welfare checks, and a warlike attitude to the regulator and its appointed manager, Nicholas Weeks.
International news time now, and New York City police officers pushed onto Columbia University's campus, breaking up an escalating protest and arresting pro-Palestinian demonstrators who'd actually barricaded themselves inside a building.
It wasn't a scene you'd expect at an Ivy League school in the US. Mind you, Michael, I can say the same thing about the storming of Capitol Hill a few years back. You don't.
The precedent has been set here for unprecedented things.
Live television, precedent's been set for unprecedented things. I like that.
Yeah, just a bit of a wordsmith here, Sean. This is the same person who came up with Educailmation not long ago.
Live television broadcast show officers entering Hamilton Hall, one of the main halls at Columbia. Hamilton Hall's become the latest focal point of the protest. It had been occupied by demonstrators. Dozens of people have been detained and loaded onto buses, CNN is reporting. The police action caps 2 weeks of rising tensions at Columbia, punctuated by more than 100 arrests on April 18 and subsequent protests that culminated with the takeover of Hamilton Hall. According to Bloomberg, the activists have condemned the Israeli military campaign in Gaza that the Hamas-run health ministry says has left more than 34,000 people dead.
Sean, adults start to get lonelier from around the age of 50, following a flurry of social activity in early middle age, scientists have found.
This story is be careful what you wish for, as a parent, and you think, when will the kids leave home? Well, this story is a warning. An analysis of 9 long-term studies of nearly 130,000 people from Western countries found a U-shaped pattern of loneliness throughout life. People reported feeling lonely as young adults, which researchers said coincided with leaving school or university and perhaps moving away to look for work, according to a report in the Telegraph of London. Loneliness levels begin decreasing across the board for people in their 30s and 40s, reaching a low at about 50, before starting to rise again and continuing to get worse for the rest of their life. Researchers believe that younger middle-aged adults are the least lonely because they're often working and raising children, meaning they have lots of social interactions. Researchers looked at loneliness levels in people from countries including England, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, the US, and here in Australia. Now, previous research has found that loneliness and social isolation can increase the risk of premature death to levels that are comparable to a daily smoking habit. The study also found individuals with higher persistent loneliness were disproportionately women, more isolated, less educated, had lower income, and were more likely to be disabled.
That's actually a really sad story to finish on, Sean.
It is. I'm sorry. It is a sad story. I mean, it's fascinating and it makes intuitive sense.
Yeah.
But to get 130,000 people and measure that, it's quite amazing.
That is pretty remarkable. All right. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Your guest today is Roger Montgomery from Montgomery Investment Management, a big supporter of this show.
All about private credit and, in fact, the 5 myths of private credit that you should address when you're investing in it.
Never thought that you and Roger would be like, was it Jamie and the other guy's name from Mythbusters? You remember the TV show?
Oh, yeah. I think that's very generous of you putting me in the same sentence as Roger when it's myth-busting around investing. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's all right. I've been very generous towards you today with a whole bunch of things.
This is all Roger.
Yeah, no, it's a great chat. It is well worth a listen. Up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Also worth a listen is the new episode of How Do They Afford That? It dropped yesterday. It is all about whether you should invest in property with a family member or with a friend, some of the risks, some of the benefits, things you need to be aware of when you're considering that as a way to get your foot in the door of the property market on the property ladder. It's always a bit of a confusing kind of metaphor to use. They're kind of interchangeable, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
But you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts, and I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 2nd of May, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.